But as a tanker, what was your experience with the T-72 tanks during the operations in Sri Lanka and the cities? And how do you relate the operations of a tank in the city to that with the current context, the Russian-Ukraine conflict going on right
I think that's a very important question you asked because the Indian Army last operated in Sri Lanka when it was fighting in the built-up area, and today we have the Russian Army deployed, in Ukraine and fighting in built-up areas, and we see a lot of videos on social media.
now? Right.
So let's do some things correctly. Firstly, let's get the perspective right. When Indian Army deployed tanks in Sri Lanka, they were more to give added firepower to the infantry battalions, which had been overwhelmed by the LTT's devastating tactics and firepower. Remember, the infantry battalions had self-loading rifles with ammunition of 7.62 mm 51, which was devastating on a single shot kill. More required for conventional operations, vis-a-vis what the LTT was carrying, the AK-47 or the G3 rifles, which had immense firepower in terms of rounds per minute firing capability. Let me narrate an incident. We had Major Shunan Singh from 10 Para Commandos, who was also, heavily engaged in operations. He was asked by GOC IPKF, what is it that the SLR can't do and what the AK-47 can? So I'm told, this is a hearsay, so you'll have to go by what I'm saying as a hearsay. He told the GOC, he says, sir, give me an AK-47. I'll go belt into the jungles and you send 10 of your best men after me. I'll send you back 10 dead bodies.
Okay.
Now, he was stating that because an AK-47 has a 30 round magazine, very rapid rate of fire. You can fire single shot, you can fire a burst of 3, you can fire on full automatic. The SLR was a single shot. You had a 20 round magazine, but it had immense firepower to knock out a man and kill him instantly, no matter where you hit the guy. Now, the same infantry, when engaging with the LTT, and these guys were nimble-footed. They would operate in 5-6. They would climb up coconut trees. They would climb up rooftops. They would fire at you from one position, fire a burst from one tree, shift to the other, and therefore you could never get a sense of what was the opposition against you, and especially at night. You can't see where the fire is coming from, but men are dropping around you, and not a very good scene to be in. So the tanks had devastating firepower, a 125 mm smoothbore gun, HE shell of about 33 kgs. When you fire it at close range, it knocks off the opposition straight away. Whether the guy is on a tree or on a house, in a given area, in one round you have blasted away the opposition. So the tanks were basically being used as fixed platforms behind which the infantry would move, and they would knock off this opposition, thus reducing the casualties being inflicted. Was that the correct way of using tanks? No, it wasn't, because tanks are not supposed to be used as pillboxes. They are used in conventional sub-unit levels of a troop, which is minimum of 3 tanks. There's a troop leader, and he is able to utilize those 3 tanks correctly in a mechanized warfare or an armored warfare. The second thing that has to be borne in mind is that the Jaffna Peninsula was something which had sea on the one side, it had multiple lagoons inside. So the water table was very high. The tanks could not move cross country. There were paddy fields or lagoons where the tanks, being heavy equipment, 45 tons, could easily get bogged down. So they had to move per force on existing roads and tracks or railway lines. So the enemy knew from where you could operate.
Right.
But notwithstanding that, I mean, after the few setbacks that we all had, the combined firepower made sure that the enemy was kept at bay. Now, the same LTT had been trained by the Armored Corps also as to how to negate a tank. And so, those were being effectively used against us. They would shoot at our vision devices, because when you're closed down in a tank, you're observing everything outside through your vision devices, day devices or night devices. So they would shoot at that. They would make sure that there was glass got splintered, you couldn't have a look, so you had to pop it off your cupola and therefore you presented a target. But we found ways and means to negate that threat. Now, typically, the T-72 is an offensive conventional tank. It is not a tank designed and built to fight in built-up areas. Notwithstanding that, now let's correlate to your question in Ukraine. It's the same tank. Now the threats have changed. This tank was designed sometime in the mid-70s or early 70s and was to be used en masse against the NATO forces in the plains of Europe. And the Russian doctrine was that use tanks in plenty and use their mobility and firepower to overwhelm the enemy in larger numbers. The NATO thought process was that since they couldn't match the Russians in terms of equipment, they said we will have protection, firepower, mobility. Right. So this is just to explain the basics of as to how a tank is designed.
Right.
Now step forward to Ukraine, environment has changed, drones have come in, Azerbaijan conflict reflected as to how the Turkish UAVs were effectively used to do a top attack and negate a tank. Now typically a tank has maximum protection against its frontal arc in the front chassis, it has protection on the side, minimum protection at the top and minimum at its bottom, because most conventional anti-tank weapons are fired head on or from the sides, not from top attack or something else. The Russian army quickly adapted. They made those cages, they put nets, and they ensured that the top attack couldn't succeed. But that was just being, to use loosely the term, doing a jugaad.
Right.
Today, an active protection system for the tanks is a requirement. Like all modern aircrafts and ships have anti-protection systems on board. So a tank too needs one. There is development towards that. I think the T-90s do have a active protection system which the Russian army uses, but too many T-90s have not been used. And at the same time, there have been cases where T-90s have been shown of being, blown up from the top attack and against the Javelin missiles which the US has supplied and the missiles supplied by the various other NATO countries. The thing has to be corrected is that we really don't know whether the T-90, T-72s or the T-80s that are being shown in the various video clips which are being circulated on social media, which is controlled by the Western governments, are they Ukrainian or are they Russian? So somebody said, the Russians are going to be running out of ammunition, they're going to be running out of equipment. It's a war of 4 days, it's a war of 10 days. So 24th February 2022 and today we are sitting on 29th July. The war is going on. And I'm told the Russians have increased the number of rounds they're firing per day from 20,000 to 40,000. So they're not running out of ammunition, they're not running out of anything, they are fighting the battle that they want to. So, but it is not fitting into the template of the various think tanks in the US or in Europe or in India. Mr. Putin is Mr. Putin. He doesn't listen to somebody and he's doing what he wants to do. He wants to get Ukraine and he'll get it. Is my view. I mean, how he gets it, it may take him a year or two. Well, if the West went back on its commitment, which it gave in, say, on the dissolution of the USSR in 1991, he is doing it now to you. Just stepping away for a moment, the ruble trade is being isolated from the dollar currency. The Chinese currency is also being isolated. We are trying to get a rupee to be isolated from the impact of the dollar.
Right.
So these are new things from a unipolar world, a multipolar world. Who will win, who will lose, which are the new collaborations that come up, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on one side. You see Indians, balanced on the center, but not bending towards Russia or to Japan or the others. But on the Quad side, we are still trying to figure out as to how we can sort of keep our balance intact. So I think we are fairly well balanced, and at the same time, I think the tanks would need to get active protection suits. Tank is a weapon of offense. Tank has done its job in Ukraine. It led the Russian army into the hinterland of Ukraine to the objectives that the Russian army wanted to get to. Thereafter, please understand, there is infantry, there are air defense units, there are artillery, there are so many others. What was their role and where are they? I mean, nobody was talking about them. So why singularly look at the tank? The tank did its job. It was what it was meant for. So, but are tanks supposed to fight battles independently? No. You are supposed to be fighting as a combat group or a combined arms group, or the new term the Indian Army uses, integrated battle groups. So there's a complement which is ensuring that your close protections are there all around. It's like a naval carrier battle group. So you have an aircraft carrier, you have destroyers, you've got subsurface submarines, you've got people flying on top, your people got sensors and all around to make sure that nobody surprises that battle group, but you have the offensive capability to hit out. So you have to do that with your land forces also. So it's an evolving world, and drones will be there, swarm drones will be around, but there will be anti-drone systems and anti-swarm drone systems around. So as we spoke earlier, you have to be nimble-footed, you have to be fast, you have to ensure that your tech is up and about, and using all your resources, integrate what everybody talks about, IoT, machine learning, and all the gizmo fancy words that you hear. So
Even the laser weapons.
direct energy weapons are still under development and they'll take some time. It's not easy to firstly store energy and release it in a point form. They're still not approved by the UN and therefore still not on the list to be used as conventional warfare. Though in the space environment, the Chinese have been using it to demonstrate their anti-satellite kill capabilities. But now, since the US has also said that anything that happens in the space is now going to be taken as a conventional operation threat, so things are evolving. So it will be too early to sort of put a grid around what is logical or which is legal and what is illegal. So it's like the LOC. It's all a matter of perception. It's a line, it's imaginary. You decide which way it goes.